Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Jonathan Stewart, and I'm a member of the Shenandoah Group of the Sierra Club Executive Committee. On behalf of the Shenandoah Group of the Sierra Club and Climate Action Alliance of the Valley, I want to thank you all for joining us this evening for our discussion. If you're interested in connecting with our local Sierra Club group or looking for ways to get more involved in general, please don't hesitate to reach out via email, sc.shen.group@gmail.com. You can also connect with us on our Facebook page, facebook.com/sc.shen.group. If you'd like to learn more or get involved with Climate Action Alliance of the Valley, or CAV, you can find them at climateactionallianceofthevalley.org. I'll go ahead and send some links here in the chat for you all to have them. And keep your eye out for our next free event. We're going to be talking with Dr. Jamie Kurtz, who's a professor of psychology at James Madison University and the author of The Happy Traveler, Unpacking the Secrets of Better Vacations. She's going to be joining us potentially February 22nd. I think we're still waiting to nail down that date. She's going to be talking to us about how to have enriching travels close to home. But tonight, we are thrilled to be joined by Connor Kish and Bob Shippee, who are here to talk to us about the upcoming legislative session in Virginia. Connor Kish serves as the Sierra Club Virginia chapter's legislative and political director. He is a veteran of many successful political campaigns and of the Virginia General Assembly. Connor served Delegate Betsy Carr as her legislative aide in the House of Delegates for 3 years and later assisted House Majority Co-Whip Delegate Mike Mullen. In 2018, he was campaign manager for Congressman Donald McEachin's successful bid for a second term in Congress. Most recently, he managed Henrico County Commonwealth's attorney Shannon Taylor's successful re-election and later served as an advisor. Connor graduated from Randolph-Macon College with a BA in Political Science and Communication Studies and lives in Richmond. Bob Shippee has a bachelor's degree from Syracuse University and master's degrees from Cornell University. He worked in financial services for 28 years for a predecessor at Bank of America and for Capital One. Bob ran for county office in 2015, which led him to become active in the political arena. He has been a member of the Sierra Club for many years, served as chapter treasurer from 2007 to 2010, and for the past several years has led the legislative and political committees. He volunteers full-time as an environmental advocate during General Assembly sessions. He also served as treasurer of Henrico Democratic Committee and is vice chair of the Henrico Electoral Board. Bob lives in Western Henrico County with his wife and youngest daughter, and also has 4 adult children. Connor and Bob, thank you so much for joining us virtually this evening. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking some time to listen to us this evening. I think for myself and Bob, we just want to welcome you and say that we appreciate when folks are willing to hear about what's coming up in the legislative session, because it just really could not be more important. And we'll be going through several of the reasons why this evening. But I think what we'll do is I'll start off by giving just a brief overview of the legislative session from a logistics and practical standpoint. Bob and I will both then discuss some of the legislative priorities that Sierra Club has for the upcoming session, both bills that we are hoping to have pass and bills that we're hoping to defeat should they come up. We'll also touch briefly on the administration, the incoming executive administration, and then we'll be glad to answer questions and would really like to have quite a bit of the conversation be a dialogue back and forth about what questions you have and what information we can provide to you that would be helpful as you consider getting involved or consider advocating at the General Assembly or to the legislature where you live. So just to give a brief overview, the legislative session is 1 week away. It starts on January 12th. This year, the legislature will be in session for 60 days, including weekends. And we, Bob and I will be down at the Capitol in Richmond advocating every day. This year is also a year when the state does its 2-year biennium budget. So in addition to dealing with legislation, we'll also be dealing with the spending of money on behalf of the state and state agencies, which is a very big and heavy lift each year because the state budget consists of billions and billions and billions of dollars all going into elections. So that's a general overview of the session. A lot of folks have asked, what are we expecting to face when we get there? Unfortunately, we are facing a striking rise in the number of COVID cases across the Commonwealth and really the country, and we face sort of an uncertain reality when it comes to logistics for session. One thing that the coronavirus brought us was last year's session moving to a virtual format. And just like this meeting we are having here on Zoom tonight, we were having official government committee meetings on Zoom, and members of the public were able to testify from all across the Commonwealth in these Zoom meetings. And as of January 5th, we don't know if that's going to be happening this year, or if the legislature will only be accepting advocate comments in person in Richmond, which had been historically what happens. And that's a significant problem for me because the Sierra Club is over 20,000 members across Virginia who are involved, and finding the right opportunities for them to be involved is a significant part of our work. And I am hopeful that we will have some more clarity about the best ways to be involved in the session in the next couple of days. But obviously a challenging sort of environment to be operating in when it comes to how best to advocate, and more specifically, when and where to advocate. So we're hoping to clarify that in the next couple of days, and hopefully it'll all be in place before we reach Wednesday at 12 noon, when the General Assembly gavels into session. One other thing on dynamics, obviously the House of Delegates changed party control in the 2021 elections. The Republicans.
Do you have any additional information about the scheduled boosters?
There we go. Taking back control of the House in 2021 after the Democrats had taken control in 2019. Since the Senate operates on 4-year terms, the Senate is still controlled by the Democrats. So we have a split chambers, and the governor's office controlled by the Republicans. So that'll be an interesting combination of things to watch. And as you'll hear Bob and I talk about our priorities here in a second, it will become the key to how we deal with several of the priorities that we have when it comes to things that we've already passed and progress that's already underway that we don't want to see stopped. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob to mention a few of our priorities, and he and I will go back and forth discussing those, and then we hope to take some of your questions. Bob?
Thanks, Connor, and it's great to see everyone here on this call. Friendly faces and names that I know well, like Tyler and John and Gary and Susan and Dave Statz, who actually installed my first solar array on my roof a few years back. So it's great to see all our friends here tonight. And I'm glad, Jonathan, you called out CAAV. I love working with that group. We've met with legislators the past few years, and I think it's a group that has growing power with some of the legislators that are in those counties that often aren't thought of as environmental bastions of the Commonwealth. But yeah, I think one thing that you're likely hear multiple times from Connor and I tonight is that this is going to be a defensive year. So top 3 priorities are defense, defense, and defense. And I can't take credit for that quip, as that has been said to us by different Democratic legislators that we've met with leading up to this session. And by the way, we've taken great pains to meet with a very large percentage of the senators, especially because we know that we need them, every one of them. We need to form a backstop against the attacks that we know are coming. So I thought we'd start off with defense, and there are 4 or 5 key laws that we have achieved over the past few years, and I don't even think we were through celebrating the passage of some of these bills before the control is now shifted. Obviously, Reggie has had a lot of press in the last couple of weeks because the governor-elect has come right out and said that he wants to get out of Reggie. We can talk more later if you want about what that would look like. We don't think that he actually can do that through the executive branch, but clearly we know that that will be under grave attack. We know with the House in Republican hands, there will be bills that pass the House to repeal Reggie. So hence, we need the Senate to stop that. The other obvious target of the Republicans is the Clean Economy Act. This has not been talked about quite as publicly as Reggie, but we know from information that we've received that there will be bills to repeal VCEA that again will almost assuredly pass the House. So we'll need the Senate to stop those. Those are two cornerstone environmental pieces of legislation that simply we can't turn the clock backwards on. And so I just wanted to headline those two as keys. Of course, as Connor alluded to, we'll be trying to defend everything. So you can look at environmental justice, where we haven't done nearly as much as we need to be doing in Virginia, but even the steps that we have taken in terms of defining what EJ is and defining a little bit about what the agencies need to be doing on that front, even that we expect will come under attack. It's possible that the Clean Cars Act, which was just passed in the most recent session, could come under attack, although we're trying to take steps to bolster support for that as well. And of course, any kind of renewable energy attacks, I think, are somewhat likely, given not only the election results, but now some of the appointments that Connor also hinted at. So I'll kind of stop on the defensive front there and give Connor a chance to weigh in as well. But I wanted to lead off with that because, frankly, I think that's where 2/3 of our work is going to be this session.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I think that's absolutely right. And I think, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is a cornerstone climate policy. And when you really think about it, what the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative does is force the polluters to pay for the pollution they put into the air. And over time, and by doing that, they're forced to purchase allowances based on the amount of pollution that they have. Well, over time, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is a sliding scale, and it heads to zero. Eventually, no pollution is allowed. And that is a direct financial incentive for the polluters to begin speeding up the transition to clean energy. Of course, here in Virginia, we get to deal with what Dominion Energy views as their role in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is significantly different than we view their role according to the law. But all of those things are at play here, and it's important to note that in states that have adopted the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative for years, going back a decade, they have seen economic growth at 33% higher rates than non-Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative states, meaning that states are attracting investment in jobs and renewable energy by being a part of this. And Glenn Youngkin saying that he wants to take Reggie out as his first action as governor really doesn't seem to line up with his initiative of bringing jobs to Virginia. This is how we do it, and he's taking a direct swing at it. And then one thing I'll add to Bob's mention on the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which is, Virginia Clean Economy Act, shorthand is VCEA, is the most ambitious and most successful climate legislation to ever pass in the South. That's fact. It's hands down, it's true. By 2045, it mandates the closure of all carbon emitting, polluting energy generation facilities. And we are expecting several attacks on that law. Mainly, I think the first one that we're already starting to see a little bit of noise around is taking away those closure dates and allowing the carbon emitting facilities, coal plants, gas plants to continue operating beyond 2045. So these are sort of the nitty gritty details of why, Bob and I are making these sort of the top defensive priorities for the year, because they are critical. They're sort of the pinnacle of climate action that we've accomplished over the past couple of years. And while it may not be possible for the Republicans to fully repeal RGGI or the Virginia Clean Economy Act, they can certainly take swings around the edges at it. And those swings around the edges are where a lot of this climate progress is actually being made. The bill itself is 100 and something pages long, but they find one sentence and they do a lot of damage. So that's why it's really critical that we make these things the top priority, because there's so much baked into them, and there's so much progress being made throughout all the different sections of them that it really becomes scary to consider where they may be looking to go backwards. So, and I think Bob's also right to mention the Virginia Environmental Justice Act, which finally does some good to communities that are consistently targeted for polluting facilities over other communities. We know where those communities are. And the Virginia Environmental Justice Act finally gives the people that live in those communities a voice. And what the Virginia Environmental Justice Act did most recently was assist in the defeat of the Chatham compressor station for the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which was a huge victory. And we know that the law's use in that case is going to make it a target. We'll do everything we can to stop it from coming under attack. And then I'll also echo Bob's point on the Clean Car Standards Act, which passed last year, which would adopt low emission and zero emission vehicle policies in Virginia. This is an overlooked gem, I think, in my opinion, because we spend a lot of time talking about how we generate our energy in Virginia. Where does our energy come from? Is it coal? Is it natural gas? Is it solar? Is it biomass? But when you look down at the numbers, start considering the total carbon pollution in Virginia, it's actually 40% coming from the transportation sector, not the electricity sector. And within that 40%, 26% of all carbon pollution in Virginia comes from the use of individual automobiles. And so the biggest swing that we can take to reduce carbon pollution in Virginia on a sheer numbers basis is to lower the amount of internal combustion engine vehicles in Virginia. And this law does that starting in 2023 for the 2024 car model cycle. But we anticipate a tax on that too. Even though the demand for electric vehicles is sky high and people can't find them at their dealership lots because they're not there. And yet this is another attack on the future of the automotive industry, which in case Mr. Youngkin has missed it, is one of the largest employers in this country, and is sort of innovating the future. And I think that's under attack as well. So any other thoughts on that, Bob?
I just wanted to, I'm looking at the chat, and Tyler is already doing some promo work for us for the February 16th meeting that's coming up where we will.
That's right.
We're
on tour.
Present. That'll be the mid-session tour date for us. But I also see a comment from Heidi about really seems to relate to Reggie, which is if polluters weren't forced to pay for their cleanup, who pays for it? And I think there's some subtlety to that question, Heidi, because if Reggie went away and VCEA is intact, then you're right that there would still have to be in effect cleanup, because the ramp down to zero carbon from the energy sector would be intact. That would basically mean that the ratepayers would foot the bill. You can argue that that's already the case, even with the Reggie allowance purchases by the utilities, because of course they can, and the state regulators have already allowed them to apparently pass through those costs to ratepayers. So, and many states don't allow that. we were actually kind of disappointed by that, because I think if I read the decision correctly, they're even allowed to get a rate of return on the the Reggie costs, which absolutely should not be allowed. But anyway, that's a separate conversation. But yes, it will be ratepayers that end up footing the bill, is the way I would characterize it. And you are also correct with your note here that economic factors, monetary factors are what drives Republicans and a lot of Democrats too, don't forget. So I hope that answered the question, but I didn't want to lose track of that. Connor, did you have anything to add to that before we kind of shift to? Okay. I don't want you to leave you with the impression that we're just going to be playing defense 24/7 here. There are, we're realistic. We're realistic about what is possible in this kind of a divided General Assembly, but there are bills that that we will be advocating for, and that our allies in the environmental community will be advocating for, that will play a role with as well, with our huge grassroots power that we wield here in Virginia. I'll call out a few of them, and I'm sure Connor will not only fill in some blanks, but embellish on the ones that I mentioned. If you haven't gotten this impression, Connor and I are kind of a tag team here, so we will not just on this call, but in the actual session, we'll be focusing on different bills. He may play the lead on one, I may play the lead on another. I may be testifying in one committee, he may be testifying in another. This is just how we have to work. We discovered this some years ago, that it just, you need multiple people to cover off on what's happening at the General Assembly. And by the way, and Tyler and others also play a role here. We have, one of the largest groups of citizen activists in Virginia, and I love seeing you all in the hallways of the GA, especially if you're lobbying your legislators or testifying in front of the committees. I mean, that's where it happens. That's where it happens. So appreciate the huge team effort that this takes. But and I see Catherine has mentioned the Eevee rebate program. So why don't I mention that? So that was a nice victory to get the electric vehicle rebate program stood up, if you will, but no money was given to it, which was a surprise even to cynical people like me that thought it would probably be underfunded. But the fact that it was completely unfunded was terrible, because of course you don't have a program with zero money. So and I don't think it's in the budget currently, which is problematic, because that will require a bill to be brought in the session to amend the budget. I believe that is happening. In fact, I know it is. And so we will want to advocate for funding of that really good program. Some of the other bills that we've been working on, Connor mentioned the outsized effect of transportation on the carbon footprint of Virginia. One of the ways to attack that is through government fleets. State and county and local, they all have some size fleets, and they all, of course, have to turn those over as the vehicles depreciate and become, no longer usable. There is a bill, and Connor will talk much more about this, I think, but there's a proposal that, as that happens, that the analysis not just be on the sticker price of the vehicles, which today is still sort of weighted towards cheap internal combustion options, but rather look at the entire life cycle ownership cost of vehicles, which we believe would essentially force a shift to electric vehicles over the next few years. So that I think that's a very important bill. Again, I'm sure Connor's been working on that more, and he'll embellish on it. I've been working quite a bit on a bill to enable localities to utilize stricter building code standards, if you will, for energy efficiency than what the statewide building code says. This is something that's very important. You know, after energy and transportation, the energy used by buildings is that, and agriculture, sort of, those are the big four, right? So we need much more efficient buildings, and Virginia is a little bit behind the 8 ball on efficiency, and that's because of the special interests that really wield a tremendous amount of power in the General Assembly, the home builders and other entities. But we feel like there's an opportunity here to not make it prescriptive, but to have another higher efficiency option for certain jurisdictions who want to be held to a higher standard. Couple others I'll just mention. There's again, this is a budget item really, which is to ensure that any new schools, or I believe, Connor, correct me if I'm wrong, substantially refurbished schools would have funding to significantly upgrade their heating and air conditioning systems, as well as have solar opportunity put on solar roofs. This is just a natural thing. I mean, we've got funding coming from the federal government that can be used for this. It was discussed in the special session last year, but was not really addressed in the way that it needs to be. So Senator Favola will be putting that in. There are, I just will mention 2 others and I'll turn over to Connor. There's a bill to reform the way that our electric co-ops are governed. Many of you are in area. In fact, many of you are undoubtedly electric co-op customers, member owners, as they call them. And you know, a lot of them do a tremendous job, but most of them in Virginia are not operating with what most of us would call full transparency. And so there's some basic governance principles that we are proposing be implemented to enable, you know, members to attend board meetings. There are some co-ops that don't even allow that. There are elections that are jury-rigged at many of the electric co-ops, and we just want a fair democratic process there. So we can talk much more about that if you like. And then the last item is one that's still developing, and that I will actually learn more about tomorrow, which is around reforming the process of reforming the way that the electric utilities get their rates established. So again, this could be its own topic, but essentially there are still many items in our laws that stack the deck in favor of the utilities getting not only a standard rate of return, but plus. And as we all know, that's led to hundreds of millions of dollars in overcharges for Virginia ratepayers, just on the Dominion side, but it's also somewhat true on the Appalachian Power side. And there is some attempt we tried a raft of bills last year, and of course many of them passed the House, by the way, but they all met their demise in the Senate Commerce and Labor Committee, which is composed primarily of utility allies. So we're not going to give up. There's some language that's being pounded out now to try to straighten that out to some degree. It'll be simpler, more I think much more narrow than what we were trying to do last year, but more to come on that. I'll take a break and hand it back over to Connor for more about those.
I want to add a couple things. The first on the bill Bob mentioned related to the solar ready roofs. We think this is there's never been a bill that makes more sense than this bill. Building a new building in 2022 that cannot hold solar panels on the roof is not an acceptable answer. And yet there are localities doing that across Virginia today. On top of that, the schools that would do it, and government for that matter, but for the schools particularly, that would go and put solar panels on the roof, they can do that at no upfront cost. They can totally switch the entire way that the building is powered through a power purchase agreement, which is a way for the schools to finance the construction of the solar, and pay it off in a way that is so much quicker than if they had continuous costs on that building over the entire lifetime of the building. If you look around, schools are 100 years old, and schools are going to be used for the next 100 years if they're constructed today. It doesn't make any sense to not do that. And so we're hopeful for that Senator Favola bill. It makes good environmental sense and good economic sense for localities that are already pinched for cash, particularly local and small school divisions that don't have the capacity to keep constructing a new school every year, like some of the larger jurisdictions do. And then on the bill about government fleets, so the Commonwealth, the state of Virginia, has about 115,000 cars that it owns. And so we're hopeful, and obviously it takes some time for those cars to be used and then roll off the deck, but it's about 15 years for that to happen for the average car that the state owns. So we're hoping to get a jump start now on starting the transition of that fleet over to electric vehicles, because it is cheaper and better for the environment. And so we think, again, similar to the solar on schools, those are two really, really common sense things that we think, given the dynamics in the legislature, could be potential success stories this year. But I see Bob is answering questions in the chat, so back to Bob.
Yeah, just trying to answer a couple of them. If I can even keep up here, there's a lot, which is great. I'm going way back up to the top. So Heidi had asked about the federal infrastructure bill and whether that has funding besides just for the fairly well-known EV charging infrastructure. I am not an expert on that bill. Connor, I don't know if you know more, whether there's maybe some rebate money in there or anything else related to EVs. Do you know about that?
I don't think there was in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. I think there is in the Build Back Better.
Yeah, I think that is right. Thomas, I tried to get to yours. Not a great answer, but I do not think that they're looking at shipping pollution. Connor, Susan has a question for you around meeting with leadership in, I guess, is this a Hampton Roads? Oh, Department of Navy. Yeah.
Yeah, I have not met with the Department of the Navy. They are often reluctant to meet with interest groups, but the Navy is one of the biggest when it comes to advocating in Congress, putting climate change in what they talk about. Obviously, it would make sense that they do that because their bases are the most threatened from sea level rise, as they're all coastal, and so they do talk a lot about that, but haven't really had any luck with any interactions with them.
Christine has actually a couple of comments here about school solar. So what Connor and I are talking about here is simply a bill that would facilitate the money moving to schools for the purpose of upgrading HVAC systems and getting solar on roofs. So that's basically what we're talking about. Your overall concern about school systems not being interested in putting solar on the roofs, it's a valid concern. I'm really always surprised when I hear that. So I live in Henrico, and I was able, it's kind of a purple county, right? I was able to get them to put solar on the 2 new schools. They just, I say me, advocates, including me, were able to influence them to put solar on the 2 new high schools that they just built. And I think that's what it takes. I am amazed that they don't understand that now, at this point in time, that there isn't significant savings available to them. And the other thing that's changed in the last few years is that they don't have to put out a penny in capital expense if they don't want to. If they have the capital reserves, great. The numbers are even better. But if let's say they don't have the money up front, which a lot of systems don't, every legitimate installer now has programs where it's just a contract, and your savings are baked in from month one, and there's no upfront outlay. It's very simple. There's several very legit and seasoned installers that are doing this actually around the state. But you're right. I mean, I've heard this in Hampton Roads. I've heard this in the western part of the state, although it's not consistent. There are plenty of places in the western part of the state and the central part of Virginia where schools are putting solar on, and I think it's going to spread very, very rapidly. But it's amazing how ignorant some of these school boards are. I've heard in the Hampton Roads area nonsense about, most roofs can't take solar, or it's really expensive to get roofs ready for solar, and that's just bunk. I want to get to John Luker's. Actually, I see that's more of a aside for the national club. Let's see. Anything else here? So John does have a question about geothermal. And I don't know, Connor, do you have any comments about that? Getting government entities interested, not just in solar, but in geothermal. It's another great renewable energy source.
I have not seen any legislation about that, so I'm not familiar.
Christine with more, yeah, this is another thing we hear, which is just nonsense about, oh, the roofs will be damaged. Well, first of all, I just don't think that happens. But second of all, think about it. These projects are generally done on buildings that are ready for a new roof or a renovated roof. So it's usually done kind of in conjunction. It doesn't have to be, and if they're putting it on a roof that's still got 15 good years left, that they will do that. And there is not, I don't think I've ever heard of damage. And by the way, if there is damage, these companies are all fully insured. So if there was a leak or something, that would be covered. I see Heidi is calling out agriculture again. That is the effects of climate change on agriculture and crop output. I don't hear anything about that legislatively. I don't know if Connor has heard anything about that. Seems like a blind spot potentially.
Yeah, on agriculture, it's very, very challenging in the legislature. The agribusiness and the Farm Bureau lobbies are very powerful, and even wield significant influence over legislators that do not have agriculture in their districts as a large component, at least. It's not a very popular thing to talk about in the legislature. It's I don't know. I always say that it's teachers and farmers that are the ones that are always heard from the most and get a lot of support. But there is a lot of work to be done in the agriculture sector. And there's also a lot of farmers that are willing to do things, but don't have the resources to. It's a battle.
Yeah. Rob Alexander has a question. Connor, I'm going to refer to you because I do not know. Any recommendations for us on a local level regarding ARPA funding? Any chance to insert environmental values into ARPA decisions? I just have no idea.
Yeah, the American Rescue Plan Act from earlier this year had a very small relative to the size and scope of the package itself, but some small money that was sent to the states for some energy and environmental things. I'm going to put a couple of links in the chat after this, but there was a lot of money sent to the states for low-income energy assistance money. So for folks that maybe fell behind on their bills during the pandemic, opportunities to not have, their utilities shut off. Same thing for water, so drinking water and cleaning water, money that states can disperse to people that way. But a lot of these programs are set up in a way where a large chunk of money arrives at the state, and then the state puts it in a pot and turns to the localities and says, okay, apply for this. What do you need? Tell us what your needs are. And so there's a couple instances of local government sort of asking their constituencies to sort of suggest things that they would like. And I'll put a couple of things in the chat here about some things that I've seen come through with the ARPA funding. The one that I will mention, just because I'm familiar with it because I live in Richmond, but I know the city of Richmond did put $1 million that they got from ARPA money into lead pipe replacement. And I know that was a very popular move, and they qualified for ARPA money for it. But again, with all things with the federal government, localities really, unless you're a major city or a major county government, really don't have the capacity or the understanding to go through 100,000 pages of federal law to figure out what does and doesn't qualify for funding. But I'll put a couple links in the chat.
Thank you, Connor. A couple more questions I see that have come in. By the way, Susan does rightfully say that, installers will have an engineer on hand to make sure that the roof is solid, or if it needs to be enhanced at all. So again, these are professionals. I'm just baffled when school boards or even boards of supervisors act like this is some new technology that's, got question marks about it. Catherine asking about legislation around zero waste policies in general. I do not know of any proposals this session about zero waste policies. Heidi talking about agriculture again. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, this legislature, I don't think is going to address a lot of these things this session. I thought there was one other question. I think that's what I see in the chat, but we can certainly take.
Yeah, I see Rob. Rob has one question on the Shenandoah Valley Rail Trail. Yes, it is. And the outgoing Governor Northam's budget that he presented to the General Assembly, which we're going to be doing everything we can to make sure it does not get gutted this year, included significant funding for rail trails and trails generally across the Commonwealth, including the Shenandoah Valley Rail Trail, and it also includes one, I think, on the Eastern Shore, and also includes a rail trail that would connect Richmond to Petersburg down the I-95 corridor. So there's a lot of really good money in there for trails. Hopefully it survives.
Other questions?
Connor and Bob, I will note I do have the folks' ability to unmute themselves turned off, given what we're dealing with the back end here. So yeah, folks, if you have other questions, go ahead and toss them in the chat, or yeah.
Well, people are thinking if there's any other questions. For those of you who don't really know, and I see a note there about Wheeler. We'll talk about him in a second. It's kind of ruined our day, but in case you don't, some of you may not really know how the legislature works at all in Virginia. So just a quick note on that. So they do gavel in next Wednesday. Like Connor said, we're not really sure what the rules of engagement will be. I think there will be in person allowed in the building and in front of committees. I personally hope that the virtual option is kept alive as well, because it really helps folks that have to drive. It's easy for Connor and me to get to the building every day, but it's not so easy from somebody from the Shenandoah Valley or from Hampton Roads or from other parts of Virginia to get to to the building and to have what usually is like a 2 to 3 minute spot to speak your mind in front of a committee, for example, or to meet with your legislator. So I'm hoping that the virtual option will remain. But basically what happens is the committees, they'll divide up all these 3,000 bills or whatever it turns out to be, but it probably will be about 3,000. And they'll divide them up into the different committees. The Speaker of the House has basically full reign to divvy them up on that side. On the Senate side, I think it's basically similar, although the committee chairs, I think, have a little bit more power to decide what's on their own dockets on that side. They'll go through them, starting with subcommittees. And then if the bill passes through the subcommittee, it'll go to the full committee. Then if it gets through the committee, it'll go to the full floor of that chamber. Which is great when that happens, but then you have to do the whole thing over again because, of course, we have a bicameral system where a bill has to pass both chambers, and that typically happens after a date that we call crossover, which is roughly halfway through the session, sometime in mid-February, where they do the whole thing over again for all the surviving bills, go to the other chamber, and they would have to pass that before they would go to the governor for signature. So that's just a little glimpse of what that 8-week process looks like that Connor was mentioning earlier. Seen a couple of notes about Mr. Wheeler. So some of you may have seen that Youngkin is nominating former Trump EPA head Andrew Wheeler to be the head of the state equivalent of that agency, which we call Natural Resources. He will, in Virginia, it's, for better or for worse, it's very unusual. The Senate has to approve the cabinet nominations and all nominations. In Virginia, it's very unusual for the Senate, even when it's controlled by the opposite party, to fail to approve those nominees. It will likely be a full floor vote by the Senate. And of course, many organizations, including the Sierra Club today, voiced their vehement opposition to this nomination. But I just want you to know that it's pretty likely he does get through. But we are certainly encouraging you all to voice your opinions to your senators and to let them know this is a big deal, because of course, they will have to decide, each of them individually. Let's say I would hope all of them would not want Wheeler, all 21 Democratic senators, and maybe even some of the Republicans would not really want him to be Secretary of Natural Resources, but they are making political calculations about, how much should I oppose this? Will I have to work with this administration going forward? So do I want to make this, sort of the hill that I die on, that kind of thing. So you should tell your representative how you would like them to react to that particular nomination. Let's see. I think those are the main items. Dave Stetz is asking about weekly updates. Certainly we have a legislative committee in the chapter, I think you all know about, and we will be meeting every week, at least once. And we will have, Connor will be keeping, Connor and the committee will be sort of updating a big spreadsheet of all the bills that come through. We haven't in the past distributed that to all of the chapter, but that's something that we could think about. Certainly when there's a big item that comes up, we will generate action alerts to the broader membership. And we will have at least one, if not multiple points during a session where we either have, we'll certainly participate in environmental lobby days, and we may have sort of a press event. Connor can speak to this. I think we may have a press event at some point that sort of goes through an update of where we are, but that's kind of what we've done. But Connor, do you want to speak to that question more broadly?
Yeah, it is very difficult to do a weekly email that goes out publicly because things change so quickly. And by the time I'm able to get it out, it's almost either wrong or needs to be updated. So what I do instead of that is I send a weekly email just to legislators with a very clear, we support these bills, we do not support these bills, we're neutral on these bills. Because there are a significant number of legislators that really want to know that. And so I try not to muddy the communications that I send out at the risk of confusing anybody, particularly the legislators. I mean, I have seen legislators take my email and print it out and take it with them to committee and look at the list of bills and say, Sierra Club doesn't like this, I'm voting no. I mean, I've literally seen that done. So I try not to muddy the waters up too much on updates, but Bob is right. We will send action alerts when we have a pressing need for communications. There's going to be, spoiler alert, there's one tomorrow on Andrew Wheeler. So I think, we do sort of try and keep folks as updated in the most sort of explicitly efficient way that we can. And then one more thing on Andrew Wheeler, this is, as Bob said, this has wrecked our day, and that's true. But I think, I have gotten a couple of calls today from senators who are saying, I'm not voting for Wheeler, what do I need to do? And so at the very least, there's going to be a very, very ugly confirmation fight, which is not, as Bob mentioned, typically what happens here in Virginia. We hear about at the federal level, there's basically a confirmation fight for every single thing that happens. That doesn't really happen here. It's only happened once before. It happened in 2006 when the House Republicans defeated the nomination of Tim Kaine's Secretary of the Commonwealth over his support for unions, which was apparently radical. And I think that there is a chance of a very, very high stakes, very public, very ugly confirmation fight for Wheeler that will be unlike anything we've seen in Virginia before. Do we have 21 votes in the Senate against Wheeler? I don't know, but we're going to try really hard to get them, and certainly Youngkin's on notice about what he's done today. So just wanted to add that.
Jonathan, where do you want to go? How much more time do we have?
And technically, we have 5 minutes, so it's up to you. We can let the questions roll in. If you guys want to hang out, we can let people dip off if there's folks that want to continue. But yeah, we're scheduled for an hour, so we can honor that if you'd like. But if you're trying to stay around, I'm sure there's people that would like to.
I want to thank people for being so engaged. It's been an inquisitive group, which is good, a very good thing. We don't have all the answers, of course, but I'm glad to see such a wide range of questions. And I hope you'll continue to be engaged through this session. I've seen a lot of these comments and questions about getting updates on the bills, getting the bill numbers and so on. Connor and I will have to put our heads together around what's the best way to do that. I think there's got to be a way, and maybe route it through group heads or something, but we'll try to get creative. Laura, do you have your hand up with a question? I don't know if she can be unmuted.
Am I unmuted now? You can hear me?
There you go. There you go.
Yay. Okay, that worked. Yes, as I posted in the chat, I am going as Harrisonburg City Council member to the VML Local Government Day, February 3rd. That's part of why I wanted to tune in here and see what I might lobby our legislators for in the climate realm. So I want to stay in touch with you guys.
Good. Yeah, please do. We kind of gave you some top line priorities tonight, but as we go along, there may be new ones. I also see a note from Rob around our common agenda. So Connor and I, meet with our VCN, Virginia Conservation Network friends very regularly. Met with them again today, for example. And we helped with some sections of the common agenda. And so our opinion on the OCA is that, it's a very strong document, and that we're very fortunate to have an umbrella group like Virginia Conservation Network in this state, because you've got groups that are real experts on water quality. You've got groups that are experts on public lands and transportation, and you name it. Sierra Club is sometimes looked at as the energy experts, which, I think we are. But there are other groups as well that have a lot of expertise in energy and environmental justice and some of the other things that we focus on. But when we don't know a particular topic, like some of the ones that you brought up in the chat today, our partners with VCN is another option to go to try to get some more information.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that, that 3 times a week during session, all of the lobbyists for environmental organizations in Virginia meet at the Capitol to go through what's going on, share information that we have with each other. So it's not like Sierra Club doesn't talk to League of Conservation voters, and League of Conservation doesn't talk to these. I mean, we all talk to each other in the building and are keeping track of bills together. And when there's a bill that has the majority of the community behind it, then the Conservation Network itself will take a position in support of or against a bill. So we're rather organized on that front, and we're lucky to have that organization in that capacity, because as Bob mentioned, it doesn't exist in every state. Certainly, it certainly doesn't exist across topic areas. So we're lucky to have that sort of clearinghouse.
Excellent. Well, we are at 8 o'clock. So Bob, Connor, thank you both so much for joining us. And I just want to reiterate the note that was left in the chat earlier to put on your calendars, that Bob and Connor will do a mid-session update on Wednesday, February 16th from 7 to 8 p.m. on Zoom. That's going to be from the York River Group. They'll be setting that up. So keep your eye out for social media and other channels to get that invite out to you.
Yeah, and Dave Stetz has put a very helpful reminder in the chat as well, that even though we don't put out to the public a tracker of all the bills, the VCN group does, and it's pretty easy to get on their email list. So that's another good tip.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.